Hey everyone, this is Charlie Shrem, and you're listening to Untold Stories. This is a show where we dive deep into the lives and personal histories of some of crypto's most influential leaders and find out how the crypto movement truly came to be. Let's dive in. As I'm getting closer to releasing my 50th episode, it's about time I released this episode with one of my really good friends, Marshall Long. You've probably never heard of him, and that's okay. Marshall is one of those people that doesn't have a huge social media following. Many people have never heard him, and he's very quiet. But Marshall is an OG, and he's been involved in the Bitcoin space since 2011 as an early Bitcoin miner. He really was one of those people that pioneered the concept of Bitcoin mining as an industry and not just something that people would do for fun. I recorded this episode when I first had launched this show maybe 6 months ago, and I didn't want to release it yet until I had a larger listenership and following because it wouldn't do the show justice. And so I felt that this time was the right time to release it. Marshall is one of those people that really remained true to his word. Even when I was in prison, Marshall was physically writing handwritten letters to me. You know, and we weren't even talking about Bitcoin. It was just to help me keep my sanity. When you have someone like that who stands by you during the good and the bad, there's a debt that I feel like I owe. And so I wanted to wait to release this episode. You're going to enjoy it because unlike other mining episodes that I have released and will release, Marshall's story goes back very early, and over the years, he's kind of faded into the background. A lot of people, early Bitcoin people that got involved, very similar things happened to them. Either they got burnt out or they just, faded into irrelevance. And this is something that I fear too. One of the reasons I started this show is it was a way for me to continue to be in this industry. And that's something that I love to do. So this is not technically a special episode. It's a special episode for me. Really enjoy it. And I'll talk to you guys in a few minutes right after we give some love to our sponsors. I'm so honored that Untold Stories is sponsored by eToro. eToro is the smartest crypto trading platform and one of the largest in the world with over $1 trillion in trading volume per year. What I really love about eToro is that the CEO has been around the Bitcoin space since 2012, so they really put their money where their mouths are. US customers, myself included, we can trade the most popular crypto assets, in fact, almost all of the ones that you want to trade, with low but transparent fees. So you actually know what you're paying for everything. And that's really important. So if you're not ready to trade yet, you can practice building your portfolio with the eToro $100,000 virtual trading feature. So you can create this whole portfolio without trading with any real money to see how you'll do. And you can learn all the different ins and outs without using any real money yet. And then once you're comfortable, you can enter the market and start buying and selling crypto for real. Best of all, one of my favorite features is that you can connect with 11 million other eToro traders in the world, myself included. And we can talk trading, charts, and all things crypto. So listen, head on over to eToro.com, links are in the show notes, and build your crypto portfolio the smart way. I want to thank and give credit to the first ever sponsor of Untold Stories, Scott Offer. Scott is a Bitcoin mining consultant, and I really want you guys to check out one of his coolest apps that's free to use. It's a Bitcoin mining profitability calculator that you can check it out before you get involved in mining, or if you just want to learn more about whether mining is profitable and how it works. The website is cryptomining.tools. That's cryptomining.tools. You can enter your estimated uptime and get more realistic profit projections. It includes really cool features like the impact of the Bitcoin block reward halving, which is actually coming up extremely soon. Their API allows you to embed profitability calculators and other live data directly into your own website, all for free. Also, if you're wondering which miner is the most efficient or has the best chance of breaking even, you should try out their interactive hardware comparison chart. So it's a hardware comparison chart, so you can compare all different types of miners for all different coins and tokens, and it's interactive, so you can play around with it. It's by far the best tool if you have any questions about mining or if you want to learn more about mining, it's the best tool. You can check it out. As a mining consultant, Scott helps you make data-backed business decisions. He will be involved in the process if you want to buy a miner, if you want to sell a miner, if you have miners that need to get into data centers. I mean, if you follow Scott on Twitter, even if you're not in the mining industry, you learn so much. I follow him. It's super cool. You can check it out on Twitter or Telegram at Offord Scott. That's OFFORDSCOTT. That's OFFORDSCOTT. Again, I want to give a special thanks to Scott. You were my first sponsor when the show was just launching. Thank you so much. Untold Stories wouldn't be here without the amazing production company Blockworks Group. A few months ago, I approached Blockworks Group and I said, hey guys, I want to do a show, Untold Stories. Can we make it happen? And these guys are the only event and podcast production company that I trust. Really, the show is powered by them, and it wouldn't be here today without the amazing work of the Blockworks Group team. So for access to all the premier digital asset conferences and to check out their other podcasts in their network that they produce, check them out at blockworksgroup.io. That's blockworksgroup.io. I promise you will not be disappointed. Our next guest is very interesting. His name is Marshall Long. Marshall's a really good friend of mine, and he's a serial entrepreneur. His background in crypto initially is from mining, and he's actually known as one of the first Bitcoin miners, being the CTO of Final Hash, a Bitcoin mining consulting company. He's also recently broken out into the esports industry, which is what I actually want to talk about, and is the CEO of Mockit Esports. Marshall has an expertise in P2P economics, as well as breaking into new markets, mostly in Asia. So Marshall, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
There's a lot of topics. I want to talk about Asia because you lived in, I know you do a lot of stuff in Asia and Malaysia, all over that region. You're also very big into esports, which has been touted as one of the game-changing or killer apps for crypto, but it's not really being spoken about enough. So I want to talk about that. But one of the first stories I always like to tell, and we always do this when we talk in our fireside chats, our listeners can hear us at the next North American Bitcoin conference. We actually had Mo on the show, who runs that event already. But one of the stories that I like to tell is we knew each other from 2012, 2013, but we didn't really get to know each other until one day I was sitting in prison and I got a letter from you. Now, that was very interesting because, like most people of our generation, no one really writes letters anymore. So I didn't expect to receive a lot of letters. You know, I got a lot of magazines and everything, which was great. But to actually sit down, physically write a letter, get the address, get a stamp, find a mailbox, it requires like some effort. And what spurred you to do that?
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting, right? Because we've known each other. We've been in, those Skype groups back in the early days. And then when all this stuff was popping off, for you in particular, right, it was an interesting opportunity for me to check back in and be like, hey, man, don't feel like, you're all alone. I get it. Because, the early days were rough, dude. And you kind of were a martyr for those early days for us. So
those Skype groups were very interesting. So basically, I'm going to paint the picture for our listeners. Let's go back to 2011 to 2000 and I would say 14. 99% of anything that went on in crypto went on in like three different places. You had the Bitcoin Talk forums, which are now known as bitcointalk.org, but back then it was just forum.bitcoin.org, which was the website that was started by Satoshi, and that was like the majority of anything that was going on. Then there was IRC, but IRC isn't as welcoming to and easy to use, and it's also misses out on a much richer user interface. But most people hung out on these Skype groups. And Marshall, we're still part of one that still exists that I think has to be the oldest Skype group and we can't even say its name because the rules of talking about it still apply, and we'll get kicked out.
The first rule of that group is you don't talk about that group.
Yeah, you can't talk about that group, and I hope we don't get kicked out now for talking about it. But we won't say its name. But some of the really early people were part of that group. Like we all used to make fun. Yeah, Vitalik. Vitalik was in that group. We make fun of Vitalik. You know, who's this kid? And those were the groups. You know, in order to be in that group, and one of the best thing that group has was its rule that you had to be referred to. You have to be referred by four or five other people.
Yeah. So it's similar to kind of like the round table now, right? If you want to get in, people have to
talk about the round table either.
Oh, you could say the word round table.
All the listeners are probably like, what is this secret stuff going on?
A lot of stuff going on, guys.
But those Skype groups were so much fun, and those were like our family, and that's where we talked about. And there were some crazy, heated arguments. I remember like the first crazy arguments of proof of stake versus proof of work were going on in those Skype rooms.
100%. Yep. I still remember those. Those are from a bygone era for sure. And now, you know, in my opinion, Bitcoin Talk's just like a dirty cesspool of noise and doesn't really accomplish much. But now I
don't even log into Bitcoin Talk anymore.
It's becoming quickly a waste of time for sure.
Well, it used to be that you can do business on Bitcoin Talk. And
group buys. You remember all those crazy group buys for ASICs back in the early days? Man, those
group buys for graphics cards, for ASICs, for physical Bitcoins, for all this stuff. But here you are trusting random people around the world to buy shit. So you're sending one person as the escrow, and all of us are sending thousands of dollars to this one person. And then this one person would send out, you know, do the group buy, and then we'd all get our shit. But the funny thing is that we never even had a doubt in our mind that we'd get scammed. Like was like we're all in crypto. We have bigger fish to fry. We're not going to screw each other.
Cool stuff. And so that's one thing that I will say that's a huge stark difference from now and then. Now the big popular thing is, don't trust, verify, code is law, blah, blah, blah. In my opinion, I'm a pretty simple-minded guy. I'm from Texas. I still like to trust people, and it makes things very easy to operate. And I still exercise that kind of mentality in all the business stuff I do. And that's one thing that I feel like we have lost a lot. You know, you could send, perfect example, when Cassatius was running his coins, right? You didn't know if you were going to get anything shipped. You would send him 1.1 Bitcoin. He would mail you a physical Bitcoin. That's it. And it wasn't like this whole, well, are you verified? Do people know you? And now I think that's just like maybe a symptom of how big and widespread the industry has become. But that is for sure one big difference.
That's a very interesting point. And I'm going to have Mike Caldwell on the show, Cassatius, in a few weeks. But that's a very interesting point because nowadays with hardware wallets and physical, you know, crypto products, it's all about 2 of 3 and, you know, creating your seed on your own. And like you said, don't trust, verify. And I want to talk about that in a second. But, you know, when Mike Caldwell was doing his physical Bitcoins, he was literally printing the private key on for each coin. And he printed hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin worth of coins that I still have some. And I still till today have to trust that Mike didn't retain copies of the private keys.
That's right. And there is somewhat, until he got smacked by, I think it was SEC, right?
It was, one of the agencies.
Yeah, one of the 3 or 4 letter agencies. Now there's, I'm not sure if you've heard of crypto art, but that's the same kind of thing. That's started by a guy from Texas named Troy.
Oh, yeah, but he sells his stuff for like millions of dollars.
Yeah, so it's expensive stuff, but on some of the early pieces, he was putting paper wallets like impregnated into the art. And I sat down with him one time and I was like, all right, Troy, tell me how you're doing this securely. Because I wasn't worried. I was never worried about Troy retaining copies and then later running some kind of huge exit scam. I was only worried about somehow that those keys that he printed were able to be scraped off that laptop from some kind of exploit or vulnerability. So that's been my mindset for so long. But I think most people aren't like that.
So how does he protect? Because I have 2 of his pieces. I have a few of his pieces. I have like 3 of his pieces in my office.
Mm-hmm. So the way he explained
round table one.
Oh yeah,
but they're empty. They have no coins on them.
That's right. So the way he explained it to me was he orders a laptop. Before he even turns it on, he opens it up. He takes out the Wi-Fi antenna, and he And then when he starts it, he like takes out the drivers for all the NIC drivers, all the network interface stuff, so it can't get connected. And he's got the paper wallet generator that Luke made, and it's on a USB and just shoves it in, runs command line, and then he prints it out. So, and then after that, he just deletes it, and every so often he gets a new laptop, and that's it. So that was good enough for me.
Yeah, and obviously
I'm not putting tons, right, on because you kind of have to destroy the art in order to pull it out, right? Like you have to take it out of the frame, rip the sticker off the back, and it's a whole process. So,
but it's really interesting. So, don't trust, verify that you mentioned before is a very interesting quote. So, and like you, I give a lot of talks, and that quote I use in some of my talks, and sometimes I have to go back and re-edit or rethink about what I said. So a common theme that I say is, you say with crypto, it's don't trust, verify. So the beauty of crypto is that, or Bitcoin, at least Bitcoin for now, because nothing else has been able to achieve the decentralization that Bitcoin has been able to achieve at this point. But what I say is, I say Bitcoin has removed the need to trust someone. And when you remove the need to trust someone, then not that I don't want to have to trust you because you're a great person and I do want to trust you, but if I remove the need of having to trust you, it makes business that much easier. But I have to take a step back and think about what that means, because you struck a chord with what you just said. And the wanting to trust someone is a very core, essential part of life. Building those relationships is very important. And so not that Bitcoin will remove the ability, the need for trust. I should change that. I should say Bitcoin removes in certain business type transactions, removes the ability for someone who would potentially screw you from actually being able to do it. And then because of that, you can now build there's no incentive to screw because there's no really ability. And therefore you can then build a trusting relationship. Does that kind of work better?
Yeah, I would agree with that, with the caveat of there are always stupid people everywhere. And so some people fall for the craziest stuff, right? So I will say it's easier to get away with murder in Bitcoin, but it's really hard to initiate murder in Bitcoin. And yeah, to be honest, man, the way I kind of do stuff now is it's similar. I give people the opportunity to act shady, and that tells you a lot about a person. I'll initiate one side of a deal where if they just wanted to run off, it's not a huge loss, but it's enough. And this is actually something Peter Todd taught me. This was at Scaling Bitcoin Hong Kong. Yeah, in 2015. He did something real weird. So we're sharing a hotel room, and he left $100 on in the hotel, like right out in plain view. And we were going to go out. It's like, Peter, what are you doing? It's like $100 just sitting there. Aren't you worried that the maid's going to come in and take it? And he said, no. I said, well, you packed up all your other money. What are you doing? He said, so what I do is I leave a non-trivial amount of money out so that I can see the kind of people I'm surrounded by. And I said, oh, okay, cool. And I've known Peter forever, right? And I said, so basically, if the maid steals your $100, you feel like you would get a sense of ease because you know what the situation is and it's not so aqueous. And he's like, yeah, that's exactly right. So he does that a lot. He'll leave $20 or $50 just like out on a counter or wherever he stays to see kind of just to get a better insight into what he's working with. But
a smart, maid or whatever in a hotel wouldn't take the 20 or 50. They'd realize that is a test. You think that they would outright take it like that?
He said he's had some taken, but Peter travels all over the place. So some countries, it's down to a lot of ethics too, and the culture of that place. I'm sure
it's only happened to me once. So Peter travels a ton. I mean, he lives out of a suitcase. You travel a ton now, a little bit like me, a little bit less now. I love where I live, so I don't like traveling as much. But I've traveled, 40 something countries. I've only been robbed once. I'll tell you the story. Actually, I'll tell you two stories. And this is supposed to be untold stories of Marshall Long, not untold stories of Charlie. But here we got nothing else to do this morning. So, two story. One time I was actually on my honeymoon, and I was staying in one of the most expensive hotels I've ever stayed in my life in the south of France. One of the most, literally, it was like
the Fairmont.
No, it was in Cap de Ferrat. It was this very right outside Monaco. It was like $1,000 a night or $1,500 a night or something. And I did 2 nights because it was my honeymoon. We had a little jacuzzi on the roof. It was a great room. You know, it was like a honeymoon action. So we stayed there for 2 nights, and I had my briefcase with my laptop out, and the briefcase I had left just unzipped, and in the briefcase was an envelope, and I think I had like 2,000-3,000 euros in the envelope. And listen, I don't know about other people, but I knew exactly how much was in there. I was counting it every day, you know, like, you know, I just knew I knew exactly, like, down to like the €1 note, how much was in there. And the maid was smart, and I knew they did it. I knew, or someone who was in the room did it, because a lot of people in the room. But I was missing, out of the 3,000, I was missing like 400 to 500. And the zipper was closed when I got back. And I know I left it open. And the reason I think they were able to do it was because most people wouldn't count how much money was there. Most people would just know they have a stack. And so if you're missing 300-400 out of 3,000-4,000, you're not going to notice that when you're looking at the stack until like a week later. And then a week later, you're never going to know.
Right.
What was I going to do? I couldn't say anything. And a second story, which is a crazy story, I was in Morocco in 2014 and 2013. Sorry, I was in Morocco 2013, and Morocco is a dry country except for some areas. So, you know, there's just no alcohol anywhere except in like the major cities, like in Fez or Marrakesh, in Casablanca, in certain like westernized or French hotels, right? So there aren't bars on the street. There was like 2 bars in Marrakesh in the new part of the city. So we're in one, we were drinking, and then we were walking back to the old city. And, you know, you don't want to be drunk when everyone else is sober. You don't want to, when you have,
that's right.
When you have millions of Moroccans walking around. What?
You don't want to be the stumbling goof. Yeah.
Yes. Cause everyone can see it. So I was walking with my now wife, and some guy stuck his hand in my pocket and to grab like a pickpocket, and I felt it. And I wasn't concerned about the wallet or the keys. I was more concerned about my phone. So he literally grabbed my pocket, and what I did was I felt it, and it wasn't even like trying to stop him. It was a reflex. I grabbed my pocket too. And when I grabbed my pocket, I grabbed his hand on my pocket and I squeezed. So now his hand is stuck on my, but I didn't do that to like be some like, you know, karate chop or whatever. Right. That was just, that was the reflex you make, you know, someone grabs you feel something in your pocket, you're going to grab your pocket. So I grabbed my pocket and I felt this hand, and I'm like, oh my God, is that a spider? Like, what the fuck is that? And I spun around. And when I did that, he lost his footing and he fell. And at that moment, I turned around. I'm drunk. It looks like from everyone else who's around, I'm in the big square. I'm in the big square with like tens of thousands of people in the old city in the Mark Central Square. I forget what it's called. And all of a sudden, you see this westernized guy, Western white guy, all of a sudden like pushing this Moroccan teenager on the ground. And if you don't know this, if you didn't know what had happened, you're looking like I'm attacking this guy. Oh man. So all of a sudden his whole group of people, his whole group of friends started like making that like slow assembly to face me. And it's like,
you know, shit's about to go down.
And Courtney is like, got her like pink tank top and her blonde hair sticking out like a sore thumb. And so I'm fumbling on the ground trying to pick up all my stuff. So when he lost his footing, out of that left pocket, I lost my wallet and my keys. So I had my phone, but I lost my wallet and my keys. We were staying in a flat, like an apartment, a few blocks away. So I picked up my wallet, but I couldn't find the keys on the ground. It was dark and I couldn't find the keys. But I was like, you know what? Forget the keys, because my friend Thomas, who you know, Thomas, was in the
flat. So
he was in the flat, you know, hanging out with his girlfriend at the time. So I was like, all right, you know, I'll just run there and we'll knock on. So we started walking really fast, and not running, but walking really fast away. I had my phone in my wallet, no keys, and the guy was following us with his group of friends. And we left the main square, and I'm saying to myself, okay, if we need to, I don't have the keys to this flat. And the problem is with these old cities, like the old city of Jerusalem and any old city, it's all these, narrow winding streets that once you leave a larger square area and you enter the winding roads, they're all dead ends.
That's right.
So I was like saying as we're walking fast, I'm like, shit, I need to call Tom and tell Tom to open up the door before, because I don't want to be banging on the door and he's in the shower or something and these guys are coming after me. So I'm dialing him from my phone, and this was the problem. I had an American phone in Morocco and I was trying to call a German phone in Morocco. So it just didn't work. I was from my iPhone, I was trying to dial his German phone number, and it just didn't, at some point along the way, the call was dropping. It was going straight to his German voicemail. It wasn't working. And I knew he had his phone on. So we kept walking, and I was like, shoot, I tried from Courtney's phone. It didn't work either. And so we walked into a bakery, and the bakery was right at the corner of the main square and our smaller street. So we're sitting in this little cafe in this bakery. It's like it's lit very bright. It's a very lit bakery, and it's very dark outside. And mind you, we're like got a significant buzz going on, and all these guys come right outside the main door of the bakery, and so we're trapped. And so I know, it's crazy. And I remember this story vividly. So they're now, some of them are sitting at a table, some of them are standing up, just pointing at us with this like mean glare on their face. And the kid who I had pushed on the ground, I didn't push him, it just kind of happened. He was there too, and he was like just leading, and he was really angry. And so I went up to the guy who owns the bakery, or the guy behind the counter, and I said, in my really broken Arabic, because my Arabic is so bad now that I haven't had practice, I offered him a $20 bill, like an American dollar bill, $20 bill, which is a lot of money in Morocco, and I made like a phone gesture with my fingers, and I pointed to like he had like a landline, and I was like, please, and you could kind of understand that I'm basically asking him to use his phone. So he let me use his phone, and he rips it off the wall, and he hands me the cordless phone. And I'm dialing Tom's number, and it's working. It's ringing. Beep, 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 beep. It's ringing, but he's not fucking answering. So it's like, what is he doing? So I'm like, we're sitting down, and I'm like, all right, we're gonna wait these guys out, and we must have waited like 15 minutes, and we're just sitting there waiting. I'm having a pastry, and these guys are not leaving. And I said, worst case, I'll just wait. I'll wait all night. We'll sit right here. I'm not leaving this bakery, because obviously they don't want to come inside. I don't know why, but they didn't want to come inside the bakery. 5 minutes later, after the 15 minutes, the owner of the bakery comes up to me, or the guy who worked behind the counter, I don't know if it was the owner, I keep saying that, came up to me, and he handed me the phone. And I looked at the phone. I thought he was telling me to like try again, but I looked at the phone, and the red light was on, meaning that it was already a live line. Someone was on the phone. So I was like, hello? And Thomas was like, hello, did you call me? And I'm like, Thomas, it's me. It's me.
Open the
he
door.
goes, Charlie, what's going on? Where are you calling from? I was like, Tom, don't ask questions. My phone's not working. Listen, go downstairs. Like, where are you? He goes, I'm in the Riyadh, because we stayed in like this 3-story Riyadh, and I'm on the rooftop. I'm on the rooftop hanging out. I said, Thomas, go downstairs right now and open up the door. And he's like, okay. And he hung up. Now, I as soon as I hung up, I wasn't confident in myself that I had relayed the severity of needing to open the door right fucking now. Right? So knowing Tom, he's like laying on the balcony.
I'll get to it.
Yeah, he's like, I'll go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hang out. Or like, so Courtney's like about to run out the door, and I'm like, whoa. Pull her back in.
We're on Tom time here. All right.
We need to wait like 7 minutes here. So we waited. It was the slowest 5 minutes of my life. And as soon as I was like, this is all right, he's down there. We ran to the thing, and the door wasn't open. And so we started banging really loud. And these guys weren't like chasing after us, and I kept turning around, and they weren't in the alley. So I was banging, but they weren't there. And then literally right when Tom slowly started opening the door, I had to like push the door. They turned the corner.
Oh no.
And I'm like, no. And I pushed it and I slammed it shut. And it was like a steel. So it was a Riyadh. It had a steel door, which went to a courtyard, and then a large, like a regular door to, and I was like, these guys are not coming in. And that was my whole Morocco story.
That's so funny, dude. I can totally see Tom just like, yeah, he's probably, finishing up his food. I'm going to just take it easy. That's such a Tom thing. He's the man. That's great.
And so like there's this culture disconnect when you have to realize, and if I was more cultured, I would have realized to not, that I should have realized to not drink basically in a country that doesn't drink. But I want to ask you a question. You're American, you live here too. The media and the administration and is very like anti-Chinese and anti-Russian right now, which is a shame because you and I have had the pleasure and the opportunities of working with a lot of Asian people, a lot of Chinese, Japanese, Malaysian, Korean. And we also work with a lot of Russians. And I love doing business with Russians. They are some of the best hustlers I've ever met. But the current administration and the media is like portraying as these evil Russians and these evil Chinese. What's the cultural disconnect that we have? And that cultural disconnect that we have in the crypto space has caused a lot of friction between the Chinese Bitcoin community and the Western Bitcoin community. But you're considered basically like an adopted Chinese when you go over there. They love you. What are some of the cultural disconnects that we have here as Americans or as Western Europeans?
So it's interesting, right? If you think about, I feel like broad picture, it's just kind of been ingrained in us forever, right? When we were growing up, especially in like small town, middle of nowhere USA, you're taught America's the best, and that's all that matters, right? So I feel like there's a lot of, it's kind of shitty to say, but a lot of latent racism that's just kind of been ingrained into our culture, number one. Number two, I will say that the weirdest experience I've had, like interpersonal, right, just like within myself, was the very first time I went to China. It was like 2012, 2013, something like that. I was working on one of the first Litecoin ASICs at that time. And it was not in like a big, somewhat westernized Chinese place like Shanghai or Shenzhen. It was in the middle of nowhere. And nobody could really speak English except for the bosses of the company. And so we had translators and stuff. But after spending 3 days there, it was a really weird feeling to feel like, even though those people couldn't speak to me and I couldn't speak to them because I didn't know Chinese, I felt a weird connection with them because of the work ethic, right? There's very few things I do in this world really well, but working hard, I feel, is one of them. And that's what I can say for that first trip there was, it's at the end of the day, we're all just people trying to get by and grind out cool projects, right? And that I knew to be true with them. And it was a really weird sense of bonding with people that I didn't know, had zero in common with. And that, for me, was like a huge eye-opening experience. And I feel like a lot of people out the gate don't have that. And it's real easy to have preconceived notions, right? So what's interesting now, though, is the crypto community as a greater whole, not just Bitcoin in particular, is becoming more self-aware about that. I could speak about my experience in EOS a little bit, where I actually started a project to kind of bridge that gap.
Was this EOS Fish?
So that was part of it, but it's basically the company is a coalition of a few different companies, but it's called The Link. And The Link puts out a quarterly newsletter specific to EOS, but it's more specific about bringing the two communities together. And it's I feel like it used to be a huge problem because of the nature of mining, right? Very adversarial as far as outward optics, right? If you're a miner and you're kind of like involved in the mining space, then really it's just like a bunch of buddies I mean, I've sent stuff to people when I didn't have enough capacity and I ordered too much gear, and I'm just like, hey, can you host this and we'll split the profit? And they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. That's literally the extent of the conversation, and I would ship it and it's done. But from outside appearance, it seems like, oh, this is an arms race, and because people can get what we say homebao deals in China where you can just pay to get cheap electricity, that's an unfair advantage, and the Chinese guys are taking over Bitcoin and all this stuff just because the nature of the economies of scale are different there. China is a huge, geographically speaking, country and ecology, right? So there's mountains, there's plains. It's very similar to the States in that regard. So the access to resources is very high. And so, of course, people want to go there. But from outside appearance, it seems like it's a co-opt attempt, right? So I feel like it's super easy to draw those conclusions if you don't actually know what's going on. So I think that's probably where the disconnect there is, to be honest.
Do you think that's something specific to the crypto space, or is it something that the whole world has to deal with?
Man, that's a good question. I can tell you that, and you know this too, it never fails. No matter where you go, you can always find somebody that you get along with that you have nothing in common with. Thomas is a great example of that, right? For me, anyway. Sure. He's very different from me, but we just get along. And I feel like it's a big problem worldwide, especially for not our generation, but our parents' generation, right? Because they grew up in the time of, especially in the States and even in China too, like a time of supreme nationalism, right? So when our parents were growing up, you had the rise of Mao, and the thoughts didn't change until Deng Xiaoping started taking over and opened China. So I feel like that's just so much a part of how they grew up, even until they were 30 or 40, right? Until what ages we are now, that it's just like hard to not feel a certain way. And I find that very true now is, a lot of my family now is Chinese, and I feel like the sentiment's changing, but that's only because, sorry to be so crass, but the older people are dying out and the younger people don't really care, right? So I think it's an evolving thing, but the older people are the people who watch the news, right? And so they can see all this propagandist bullcrap being sent to them, and they're eating it up. So I don't know the last time I turned on a TV, and I'm sure you're the same way. So I think the reach of traditional bullcrap media is slowly diminishing. And people are even now pivoting away from Facebook and even Twitter. So I feel like it's getting better and progressing. But the good news is, whether you like it or not, the world is kind of just assimilating into one body, right?
I really hope so, though. But I feel like here, at least, it's the opposite. I mean, I turn on the radio every day, and it's just the Chinese are hacking us. The Russians are this. And I'm saying to myself,
that's all like state level, like state against state stuff, right? Like for me personally, there's very little harm that could be done to me directly if a state level actor in China is hacking some U.S. government stuff. I'm now to the point where, there's not much that people can do with that kind of stuff. And it's just espionage versus espionage, right? So I'm at this point a lot more self-sovereign because of Bitcoin. And, I'm at this point, I'm damn near my own bank. Still have traditional banking because that's the reality of the situation. But if tomorrow the world just popped off, as long as the internet's online, I'm good to go. And I don't care. So
if that's a good point. If the world pops off and you have Russia, China, America war, which is what the media and the state levels want us to believe, because if they control our thoughts, they control us. If that happens, God forbid, and I don't think it would, my hope and what lets me sleep at night is knowing that because we all talk to each other, we all work together, our cultures are so intertwined at this point, American soldiers are not going to want to fight Chinese soldiers. They're just going to say, why would I do that? Like, what? I don't understand. Why am I killing people that I was just on holiday with, in Thailand or whatever?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Although I think the military specifically is a unique case. When I was in college, I was in ROTC, so I'm not pretending that I know the full extent of this, but what I can tell you from what I've seen is that that's a whole nother level of like brainwashing, to be honest. I have a lot of buddies who are in the military, and they've told me a lot of crazy stories about, when somebody tells you to kill somebody, you do it. And it's not even a second thought because of how they're trained. So that specifically, I don't think would be an issue, because when bullets are whizzing past your head, you have no time to think about sentiment or emotion. You have time to think about, I'm going to live, I'm going to die. Right?
But surely the whole concept, the people in the upper echelons of the military are going to say, wait, why are we actually fighting the Chinese?
Potentially. Yeah. That's an interesting point for sure. I think that there's a lot more existential problems to be solved before we just go popping each other. But that's just how humankind has been for literally centuries, People just killing each other. That's it.
I'm so honored that Untold Stories is sponsored by eToro. eToro is the smartest crypto trading platform and one of the largest in the world, with over $1 trillion in trading volume per year. What I really love about eToro is that the CEO has been around the Bitcoin space since 2012, so they really, really put their money where their mouths are. US customers, myself included, we can trade the most popular crypto assets, in fact, almost all of the ones that you want to trade, with low but transparent fees. So you actually know what you're paying for everything. And that's really, really, really important. So if you're not ready to trade yet, you can practice building your portfolio with the eToro $100,000 virtual trading feature. So you can create this whole portfolio without trading with any real money to see how you'll do. And you could learn all the different ins and outs without using any real money yet. And then once you're comfortable, you can enter the market and start buying and selling crypto for real. Best of all, one of my favorite features is that you can connect with 11 million other eToro traders in the world, myself included. And we can talk trading, charts, and all things crypto. So listen, head on over to eToro.com. Links are in the show notes, and build your crypto portfolio the smart way. I'd like to thank my sponsor of Untold Stories, Scott Offord. Scott is a Bitcoin mining consultant and provides managed miner hosting services in Texas. If you need to get at least 25 megawatts of miners online in the next 3 months, Scott wants to talk with you right now. Contact him on Telegram or Twitter at OFFORD SCOTT. He's offering an all-in rate of 6.5 cents per kilowatt an hour. Wow, that's like super cheap. That's like electricity cost in the Arctic, where things are automatically cooled because it's so cold. So he's offering 6.5 cents per kilowatt an hour without any capex required. Or if you commit to $170,000 per megawatt up front, he can get you a rate of 5 cents per kilowatt. Am I reading that right? 5 cents per kilowatt? That's unbelievable. Scott can get your first 25 megawatt hashing within 16 weeks from the date of signing. All the infrastructure, power lines, substations, water lines, and buildings are fully owned by the hosting company. By the end of March 2020, they will already have 150 megawatts online in Texas. This is such a super cool ad to record because my listeners are learning about mining now. Like this is really interesting. I didn't even know half this stuff before I met Scott and he started sponsoring the show. So make sure you check out Scott on Telegram and Twitter at OFFORD SCOTT. And Scott, thank you again for being my first ever Untold Story sponsor. How is the Bitcoin mining space or the crypto mining space changed in the past 6 years?
I have seen many changes, but I can speak about two groups of changes effectively, I think. The vibe and culture of mining has changed. When I first got into it, it's 2010. I was working on like this golf app where you could set your iPhone on a green and it would like track your club head and stuff with a buddy of mine in Houston named Anthony. And we went to lunch and he was like, "Hey man, you got to check out this crazy stuff I found. It's like this weird peer-to-peer money system." I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" And so kind of went down the rabbit hole with them. At first, I didn't even really only within the past, I would say 3 or 4 years, have I gotten really into like the financial ethics and inclusionary results that can come from crypto. So back then I was just like super nerd mode, like, oh, that's cool. My computer can make this stuff. Right. So I immediately ran home, and I thought it was really cool to find, basically in my head, Easter eggs with a CPU. Right. I thought that was really neat to be able to just manifest these things into existence from solving math problems. And that was the vibe for a long time. Houston hackerspace was super big, had a lot of people doing crypto stuff, and it was all kinds. It was like super underground, very cool, because nobody knew if it was legal or not, right? Because the Constitution says you can't make your own money. So we were just all like getting together, hacking on stuff, just having a good time. I think the point that changed is, in my mind, I can remember very specifically, I was walking around the Houston Galleria with my girlfriend at the time.
Is that a shopping mall?
Yeah, it's a big mall. And I had BTCE up on my phone. This was like, I don't know, 2011, 2012.
Good old days.
And I saw the price of Bitcoin go from like $30 when I left the house to $100 when I was walking around the mall, and then back to like $50 or $60 on BTCE. And I just kept thinking to myself, God dang it, I wish I had more money, and I wish I knew more rich people. Because if I could convince these rich dudes to just buy tons of it, they're going to get super rich, and I'll get super rich, and then we can do all this nerd stuff for real. And that was the pivotal point in my career where I thought, this is more than just like a game. We can make cool stuff if we had enough ways to leverage the price volatility. And then like the whole mindset of how I saw crypto change from that point. But so I think the culture for mining has changed kind of around the pricing. When I got into it, when Jihan got into it, when, Dave got into it, everybody was broke as a joke. And footnote here, I'm not in crypto to make money, but with more money, you can do more cool stuff.
True.
And you can, help more people with more resources. So let me caveat what I'm about to say with that. But when we got involved, everybody was broke. Nobody knew what was going on. And a lot of people didn't know how to take the sudden infusion of cash into their lives. So now
I am one of those people.
Sure.
I take full responsibility. And the reason I say it is because I have to remind myself.
Exactly. The flip-flops do a good job.
I was one of those people, and but I'm talking about in 2013.
Yeah.
And I crashed fucking hard.
Yeah, sure. But for you, right, I think even for you, it was way more of a kind of a meteoric rise, because in order to mine, right, there's so much infrastructure, hardware, setup that's useless for anything else except for mining. And so the ramp-up time to get to where we were was a lot less psychotic, where you made a really great product and we're just like, holy God, everybody in the world wants to buy Bitcoin from me, right?
Yes. And
so your rocket ship ride was a lot more balls to the wall than I would say probably almost anybody's. Maybe Trade Hill is a bit different, but almost anybody, nobody can say that they went from zero to hero as quick as you did. So I think there are
zero to hero to zero to wherever I am now.
Zero to hero to zero to sitting
having fun.
Sandals.
Not in Miami.
Not in Miami. That's right.
Yeah, it was funny when that Winklevoss case came out, which I was very happy with the outcome of that. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure what I can say and what I cannot say.
Brian's typing an email to you.
Yeah,
right
he's
now.
like, stop talking. But what I can say is that every time, they had to pay my legal fees twice, which was great. Right. And then what I can say is that just on the eve of their depositions, which I was allowed to ask them anything I wanted to. Oof. I was ready. I was literally
hopping
on a plane to go depose them because I was so excited.
Uh-huh.
My lawyer called me up and he's like, "It's over."
You were happy but mad.
I was happy, but I was like, "Damn! I'm so much money into this case now to prove my innocence because they had spent They spent millions of dollars in legal fees
Jeez.
and investigators looking for this imaginary 5,000 Bitcoin
That's right.
that just didn't exist.
Right.
It just never existed. It didn't. And so they were looking for it. And I opened up my whole financial world to them. Oh, do you want to hear the craziest story?
Yeah.
So another untold stories of Charlie. During a deposition, so they had done financial accounting of my whole life, like every dollar of everything, every bank statement, every accounts that I don't even remember having,
like
every Bitcoin transaction,
everything.
Every address
Cavity
I've ever
search
had,
level.
and every Bitcoin address I've ever had and used was under the microscope. And I got that because in the legal case, you get the discovery also.
Right.
And so when they deposed me for 8 hours, they asked me about specific transactions.
How can you remember that shit, man?
I don't. And there were some worrisome ones. Like, for example, they'd send like a letter to me and the judge saying, aha, we found the 5,000 Bitcoin that was Charlie. We found it. Here it is. And I'm like, fuck, like, what is this transaction? Like, I'm scared, you know?
To think like, oh, fuck, maybe there was something I forgot about.
Yeah, so I copied the address into my email, and then I figured out what it was. It was actually me just helping some other guy named John Doe set up his cold storage wallet. And this John Doe is like a very, very well-known person in the space who then wrote an affidavit saying, yo, like, Winklevoss, back the fuck off. These are my Bitcoins. These are not Charlie's.
Man,
but stuff like that happened. But the side note was, the great thing that had happened was I had actually found out because the way I paid my taxes in 2017 was I just took like how much money ended up in my bank account and I paid the highest rate. I overpaid, I feel like, but it doesn't matter. I want to sleep at night, right?
Yeah, of course.
So I paid high six figures in taxes. And I had figured out, because of their forensic accounting, during the deposition, they're like, what is this transaction of you wiring money to someone of like $100,000? And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I actually paid taxes on that, but I shouldn't have. So I was like, can I have a copy? In the middle of the deposition, I'm like, can I have a copy of this exhibit? They're like, your lawyer already has a copy of this. So I was like, hold on, we need to like pause the depo because I need this. Like, don't someone write a note for me to like get this later. And I sent it to my accountant and I was like, hey, we need to like do something about this. He's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, this is great for you.
So they helped you out.
Yeah, they helped me out there.
Funny.
Oh, but yeah, that was just a whole funny situation. How did you go from mining? And I guess I could already know your answer that mining got too many people are involved now, but then you jumped to esports. How did you make that transition?
So actually, it has nothing to do with mining, that transition.
And what is esports for those who don't know?
So esports it's not just video gaming, it's competitive video gaming at an extremely high level, usually for money. That's just esports in general. In order to make that change, there's kind of a series of events that led me to that. I ran a mining conference called Hashers United in 2014, 2015, something like that. And it was during this time when crypto went from like $1,000 to $180, right? When Bitcoin went that low. And I really started to reevaluate, like, maybe I'm too heavy on the crypto side and need to start figuring out other stuff just in case this isn't a thing anymore, right? I bought a drone company and I really got an appetite for like disruptive stuff. And I was like, all right, cool. And then a few years later, still mining. It's going okay. And by this time, I'd gotten really deep into mining, had all the new stuff, was making custom gear with people, was running really specialized setups. And when you get really good at mining, it's kind of a set it and forget it process. It takes a long time to get there, though, on years. But once I had finally got there, it was 2016, I guess, late 2015. I had basically gotten my ass kicked by the crypto industry because I'd worked for a company for like 5 months that it was Crypsy, the exchange where the CEO stole the money. And instead of handling it properly and just coming out and I quit well before then anyway, right? But the internet is the internet, and people just lost their fucking minds.
I remember that.
Oh my God. And so you know, instead of basically saying like, yo, I quit before all this went down, never had any access to anything, all the other employees got fucked too, and our own personal funds were seized too. Like, I mean, here's bulletproof evidence nobody did anything, right? Instead of doing that, I just kind of was like, fuck these clowns. And I just was like, let's figure out something else to do. It was right around that time that I started a project called Bitcoin Classic with Gavin and Jonathan Toomam and a few other people to try
Tell
to
me about that.
Jesus Christ, I learned a lot. I'll tell you that.
Bitcoin Classic was one of the first.
That's right. It was the first attempt at a soft fork and convincing everybody to increase the block size limit from 1 megabyte to 2 megabytes. And it gained a lot of support. It was interesting because around that time, the way we were showing support was people, if they were a miner, you could sign a Coinbase transaction with a certain set of bits. But for the big industry players like Coinbase and OKX and all these guys, they were just sending me an email like, hey, man, we're down to support with the caveat of you showing us that you didn't have anything to do with the Cripsy bullshit. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Privately, I'm happy to do that, right? So like I sent Brian a bunch of stuff from Coinbase, a bunch of other people just to be like, here's when I quit. Here's the D Kim signed email. Like, there you go, right? But it was a real interesting time in crypto because it was the first time I think that anybody really challenged the core status quo. And it was a lot of work. And that resulted ultimately in what became Bitcoin Cash. I don't think Bitcoin Cash would have been successful. And I think Roger probably agrees with this too. If it wouldn't have been able to even launch if we hadn't have done Classic first. Now, I'm not saying that I'm like Bitcoin sucks and Bitcoin Cash is awesome, or the other way around. I see merit in most cryptos. But I learned how toxic the community can be and how ruthless and how much bullshit you have to deal with these people from time to time for stuff that you didn't even do wrong, right?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know, man. I still go back and forth in my head sometimes. Like, it can be great because it's so fucking censorship resistant, right? Like, I wasn't a nobody trying to make a project. I had enough street cred to garner I even had like huge companies, BitPay, Coinbase, OKX, everybody was down to run Bitcoin Classic. Everybody, right? But Vlad wasn't going to put it into code base. None of the core developers were going to put it into the code base. Therefore, it's not going to get done. And that is both, in my opinion, it's a double-edged sword, right? When you get a small quorum of people to agree that they're going to build layer 2 solutions, there's not much you can do to stop them because they're stuck in an echo chamber of just yes men. I can tell you now, I've reconciled with a lot of them. Eric Lombroso, God, me and him used to fight so much about this shit. But at the most recent roundtable, he and I really patched things up, and it's all good. And most people I'm good with now, but I can tell you that the community is super ruthless at times, and that's a good and a bad thing. So basically, after about 6 months of doing this Classic stuff, I was just like, dude, I'm out. Fuck this. This is why I started mining. There's no community. There's no people. I don't have to work with anybody. There's no customers. It's great. So I just went back to doing the mining stuff, and then I kind of got bored, moved out of Houston, and thought, all right, what's the next thing? And esports was kind of in my radar, and I thought, okay, nobody's watching TV anymore. The Super Bowl's had consecutive years that have downed viewership, which, you know, the Super Bowl used to be considered the bastion of traditional television, where it's never going to fail kind of thing. And I saw this. So esports was big when I was in high school, right? 2005, 2006. And then the bottom fell out of it. But it started to make a comeback. You know, Amazon acquired Twitch for a crazy valuation. And I love games. Always been a gamer. I game every day, even today.
I just got the new Quest.
You got me too.
The Oculus Quest.
It's a game changer, dude. A serious game changer. And I kind of just sat there and I was like, all right, let's just try this esports stuff. There's a lot of interesting parallels between esports and crypto. The community is similar I would say, tech prowess wise, right? And games really transcend almost everything. So I run a fairly large community now on a platform called Discord. And there's over 50,000 people in this specific Discord server. And I've sat in on a ton of different conversations. And I've heard crazy stuff, like a guy who's 40 years old who lives in England is trading with this 16-year-old kid who lives in India some knife for a game that they both like. They have zero in common, absolutely zero in common. They almost don't speak the same language, but what matters is they both like the same game, and that's it. That's all that matters, and that's what brings people together. And so that kind of like seemingly trivial stuff is actually super transcendental, and it transcends all the other bullshit. And that's really, in my opinion, a super powerful thing. And those ideals really echo crypto, because although people can be super toxic and super shitty, the reality is people are only that way because they're so passionate about it, you know?
And because we're a bunch of socially awkward people.
Yeah, we're just a bunch of weirdos, man.
We don't really know how to, we're not diplomats or statesmen.
Right.
We don't know how to, like, convey our message, and I feel like we're all guilty of the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think we were better off with the Skype groups and the smaller community and everything, or are we better off now? Bitcoin better off? Like, what was the goal of the whole space?
So I don't think you can reach any kind of meaningful scale or adoption with just keeping it as a homeboy network, right? However, you can keep your brain intact. So I will tell you that if we would have kept it super private and close to the chest, we would not have reached the goal of giving others financial sovereignty. But we also wouldn't have gone through the times where I want to jump off a bridge because I feel like nobody likes me in the world and everybody's just a terrible person, right? So it's kind of have to sacrifice some of that so you can hit the end goal. And I think it's worth it. There were 2 years of my life that were the hardest ever, right after all the Cripsy stuff popped off.
Lessons learned.
Oh my God, man. I tell you.
Well, that's what I want to ask you. I mean, you have Cripsy, and you were part of something great, and I traded there, and then you left, and then shit hit the fan, and the CEO ran away with everyone's money, is living somewhere where no one knows where he is. And then, you were involved with in the early days of mining, which was awesome, and then mining got kind of crazy and toxic, and whatever happened. And then you did Bitcoin Classic, which your intentions were good, so the common denominator, and Bitcoin Classic was the precursor to the idea of scaling Bitcoin. And until you were involved in Bitcoin Classic, no one talked about scaling Bitcoin. It wasn't even a conversation. People were so resistant to talking about it. So if anything, what you did was at least start a conversation about the need for scaling Bitcoin, right? And so that was really important. It seems like the common denominator with you is that your intentions are very good.
The execution is often shit.
Well, it's not your execution. It's, good intentions are not transferable.
That's right.
As they say, that's why they say, like, you don't want to set a precedent for something because you never know who's going to be involved down the line. But your intentions were good, and they're all good ideas, and eventually good things came out of them. But when you kind of step back, really, like, stupid shit went on. And so I guess my point is that you got to, like, stick around in some of this stuff.
It up and stop being such a punk.
But no one wants to, because no one likes being attacked.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a guy really early in the development cycle of Bitcoin. I came across him in late 2010, I think, and his handle was Bear. Bear was a super talented dev. Like, this guy was a fucking ninja, man. And he got into it one day on IRC, I think even with Greg. And Bear just stopped deving on Bitcoin, So there's a certain aspect of mental fortitude that you have to bring to open source projects, I feel. And the reason I say that is you look at Linus, the guy who runs Linux, right? Linus Torvalds. That guy's an animal, dude. He doesn't give a shit about what you think about him. I've literally seen him walk up to the CEO of AMD and give her a middle finger because they wanted some kind of custom like firmware for some kind of Linux box, and they wanted it closed sourced, and He literally told Sue, "Go fuck yourself." And I was like, this guy was built for open source, you know.
Sure.
Jeff Garzik a great example of that too. You know, he made his first commit to the Linux kernel, I think when he was like 14 or 15. Jeff's got bulletproof skin too, man. He doesn't give a damn what anybody says about him because he knows that the project's that important. And that's just like, I guess, something you get over time, because Bitcoin is the very first large scale open source project I've ever had any kind of interaction with. And if you look back at like early internet pioneers and people who started serious open source project, Tim Berners-Lee, all these guys don't give a shit what you say about them, and they just crack on with the project. So I think as time goes on, more people will develop that resilience, and it will just be better for the project. So I don't think anybody can say like, Jeff Garzik's contributions to the Linux kernel were useless. That's just not true. The reason you can connect to the fucking internet with Linux is because of Jeff, right? But you know that Linus gave him a hard time because he was so young. So,
but a lot of people in the space now are like putting all these early devs down. Like, you know, the problem is when you're seen as a god, and I feel like this is some of the reasons that Satoshi went away, is that the higher you rise, the harder you fall. So guys, you know, Gavin, if Gavin was seen as like Satoshi too, right? Yep. You know, in the early days, we all saw Gavin as just literally like, Gavin was like the reincarnation of Satoshi. Gavin was the living Satoshi, you know, because Satoshi felt he handed off. Gavin was like Moses, you know, like God was God, or, you know, Gavin was Jesus or whatever religion you follow, or Muhammad or whatever. And so there was that. And then Gavin was on such a high of a pedestal and was seen as like
so much pressure, though.
So much pressure.
God.
And he was so good for the space. He just did amazing, amazing things. But now, because of one little mistake he made by basically being like wanting to believe Satoshi was real so badly that he believed Craig Wright, that was what his downfall was. And
he's such a petty thing, right?
It was such a petty thing. And he's apologized he's apologized for it, and he's admitted his mistake. And now when I email him to even come on this show, he's like, I don't do press anymore. And I'm like, Gavin, I will not ask you about anything of that. I just literally want to talk about, I want to bullshit about the early days. That's all I want to do. I want to talk about that one time when me and you in Austria, I want to have fun. And he's like, I won't do it. And I'm like, that sucks, because you were such an integral part of the early Bitcoin days. And I'm not trying to be apologetic for him or not for him, but it's just a shame. It's such a shame that, and that's why I'm afraid of even going out there and running a company again or doing anything where I'd be seen as like on top again, because I was there and I fell really fucking hard, and I don't want to do it again.
I agree with that. You know, I think I've always maintained that a big problem in the early days of crypto, like you remember when these companies were getting like psychotic valuations from these VC firms for like useless fucking products, right? With no business model. And people think the ICO
useless products.
Well, people think the ICO phase was psycho. Y'all should have been around in 2013 when companies were getting like stupid valuations for literally the dumbest ideas. The biggest problem, and I still maintain one of the biggest things that has hurt the development of Bitcoin specifically, is the fact that CTOs were acting like CEOs, right? So you have all, and I include myself in this, right? You have all these like dysfunctional people who don't know how to communicate face to face and are like weird introverted people trying to run companies and not fully understanding the full ins and outs of like what it takes to run a company and what it takes to like interact with the community and all this kind of stuff, right? I still think that that's one of the biggest issues that has ever plagued Bitcoin, because if you think about it, all the systemic problems we've had come from there. You know, people bitching online. Look at the people. Look at the people. You'll never see, for instance, a great parallel. Take Stephen Pear, CEO of BitPay. Compare him to, I don't know. And I'll say Peter Todd. Peter Todd's never tried to run a big company, but the way Steven interacts with people is very different than the way Peter interacts with people. Peter runs his own stuff. He runs his own company. He does his own development. But Peter would never try to run a BitPay, right? Mostly probably because it's against his ideals. But
yeah,
the reality of the situation is there's a different skill set for spearheading a project than there is for developing a project. And I'm
gonna expand what you just said. I'm gonna say this: there's a different skill set to spearheading or running a company than from spearheading and running and growing an industry.
Yes, it takes a certain amount of knowing how to talk to people. And I'm really bad at this too. That's why I have business partners who tell me like, yo, you're fucking dumb. Like, learn how to talk to people, right? It's just an evolving process.
Well, it's not easy to do
at all, especially online, right? In text. So
people make fun of me. I type so fast. I'm like a fucking fast typer. Mm-hmm. But I rely on autocorrect. Like, I literally, when I type, my autocorrect is so good, it knows what I'm going to say before I even say it. Like, I'll just type the letter like F, and it knows I want to say the. You know, it just knows because I type so quickly because I need to get these thoughts out. But the problem is that I get tons of spelling mistakes. I get criticized for it. Okay, in emails and professional settings, I will make sure. But when I'm in your Telegram room and I'm, going at it, like getting a point across, that's like going out of my head faster than I could type. I'm not going to worry about spelling the right things, spelling the right way. Because your brain works very similar to my brain, where our brains do things faster than we can actually keep up with.
That's right. Mm-hmm. God, my wife hates it.
I know. My wife hates it too because I'm very forgetful. Like, for example, someone will text me and say, hey, I want to hang out with you and your wife next weekend. I'm like, all right, work mode. I put it in my calendar. It's in my calendar. June 14th. This is what we're doing. Great. It's in my calendar. Then I forget to tell my wife about it. And then like the guy will bring it up. Yesterday he's like, oh, I'm excited for us to hang out next week. And I'll be like, oh, my wife's like, oh, Charlie didn't tell me about it. I was like, I forgot. Like I put it in my calendar so I would remember, but I failed to remind you and tell you. And I'm really bad at that.
Yeah, man. That's why we have people around us who are better than us at almost everything.
Marshall, when am I going to see you next? What's your next travel plans?
Yeah, man. I'm thinking about, I might skip over to Shanghai, but I think there's a few things this summer, right?
Bitcoin Miami in January.
Yeah, honestly, it's probably going to be that because you don't go anywhere.
I need to travel somewhere because Florida is like too hot here.
You get cooked alive out there, man.
It's really bad. Like, my probation ends September 15th, and at that point, I'm gonna
ball out of control, baby.
I'm gonna go to Europe, and I just want to be able to travel again. So for the next like 2.5, 3 months, I got to figure out. I may go to Maine for like a month or two.
All right, when you come to Maine, you got to lay over in Boston.
I will.
Hit me up.
Well, I'll fly direct Sarasota to Boston, and then I'll get a car.
Yeah, we live real close to the airport too. So.
Perfect. All right, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Great work. I really like what you're doing too. This is, I think a lot of people like to hear these kind of things, and awesome. We know everybody, right? So keep up.
Yeah, that's the point. Awesome. Marshall, last thing. How can people follow you? What's your Twitter?
My Twitter is @OGBTC.
That's like the best Twitter account, OGBTC. All right, OGBTC, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, buddy.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. New episodes of Untold Stories are released every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 a.m. EST on untoldstories.com, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Untold Stories is produced by Jason Yanowitz, Michael Ippolito, Reed Hannaford, and Riley Silbert of Blockworks Group. Our account executives are Gina DeFelice and Julie Muroff. Our content is written by Kathy Zolo, Ronnie Tishner, and Scott Offer. Special thanks to Wayne Dallaire from Jump Dog Audio Productions. And of course, I'm your host, Charlie Shrem. You can follow me on Twitter @CharlieShrem to continue the conversation. Send me some messages, feedback, or anything you want to say. And remember, please give some love to my sponsors, and I'll see you next week. Remember, strength in numbers, and information is power.